The little bell above the door jingled as an old man stepped inside the gun shop. His ball cap, frayed at the edges, bore the words Vietnam Veteran. His jacket was worn but clean, his step slow but steady. He wasn't there for attention, nor to brag about his past. He just needed a small part to repair an old rifle he had kept since his days in service. But before he could even reach the counter, the clerk sneered. "We don't carry junk parts, Grandpa," the man mocked, his voice loud enough for other customers to hear. A couple of younger men snickered in the corner. The veteran, his face lined with years of sacrifice and hardship, tried to explain. "It's not junk. It's a piece of history. This rifle. It's the last thing I have from my unit." But the clerk cut him off. "Get out. We don't deal with old junk or old men who think they're heroes." The words hit like bullets. The old man lowered his eyes, nodded slowly, and walked toward the door. His hand trembled as he opened it. He didn't argue. He didn't fight. He had already fought enough battles in his life. What the clerk didn't know was that a young Marine in uniform had witnessed the entire exchange. The Marine pulled out his phone and recorded everything, the cruel words, the humiliation, the moment the veteran was shoved aside like he didn't matter. That night, the video spread across social media. Marines, past and present, saw it. Soldiers, sailors, and airmen saw it. And so did thousands of ordinary Americans who believed that veterans deserved respect, not ridicule. The next morning, the gun shop parking lot was full, not with customers, but with Marines. Dozens of them. Then hundreds. They stood shoulder to shoulder in uniform. Silent but powerful, forming a wall in front of the shop. Some carried flags, others simply stood with arms crossed. Inside, the clerk's arrogance crumbled. His phone buzzed non-stop, angry calls, death threats, boycott messages. Suppliers cut ties. His own employees quit. The shop was finished. But the story didn't end with revenge. The Marines found the old veteran. They visited his home, sat at his table, listened to his stories. They restored his old rifle with the finest care. Each part polished until it gleamed like new. Then, in a small ceremony, they returned it to him. The veteran wept, not for the rifle, but because he realized something he had forgotten in the years of silence and loneliness. He was not forgotten. His brothers and sisters in arms still stood with him. The gun shop had closed. But something greater had opened, a reminder to the world that respect, loyalty, and honor never age. The old veteran sat in his small kitchen, his hands trembling as he ran his fingers along the polished wood of the rifle. For a long time, he couldn't speak. Memories flooded back, the faces of his brothers in the jungles of Vietnam. The echoes of gunfire, the weight of loss. He swallowed hard, looking at the Marines gathered around him. "You boys didn't have to do this," he whispered, his voice cracking. One of the younger Marines, barely 20, stepped forward. His eyes were sharp, but they carried a weight that belied his age. "Sir," he said firmly, "we had to. You fought for us before we were even born. You carried the burden so we could live free. The least we can do is stand for you now." The veteran's eyes welled up. For decades, he had walked quietly through life, unseen by most, dismissed by some. But in that moment, surrounded by men who wore the same uniform he once did, he felt whole again. Word of what happened spread beyond the Marine Corps. Local news stations picked up the story. Then national outlets. The image of the old man, his weathered face, his Vietnam cap, his rifle restored by the Corps, became a symbol. Across the country, strangers reached out with letters, gifts, and offers to visit. Soon, veterans' organizations rallied behind him. A campaign began to ensure that no veteran, young or old, would ever be disrespected again in their own community. The old veteran found himself standing on stages, invited to speak not about war, but about dignity, sacrifice, and memory. And yet, he always returned to one truth. It wasn't about shutting down a store, he told a crowd one evening. It was about opening people's hearts. Respect isn't a favor, it's a duty. And sometimes, it takes a whole corps to remind the world. The Marines cheered. Back home, he placed the rifle in a new case. One built by hand by the younger Marines. He didn't see it as a weapon anymore, but as a bridge, linking his past to their present. And their present to the future. For the first time in many years, he slept peacefully. Not because his battles were forgotten, but because he knew he'd never face them alone again. The next morning, the veteran awoke to the sound of voices outside his house. For a moment, he thought it was just another dream, voices from the past. His buddies calling him back to patrol in the thick jungle. But when he stepped outside, blinking in the morning light, he saw them. Marines. Dozens of them. Some in uniform, others in civilian clothes. They weren't there for protest this time. They were there for him. The youngest among them, the same Marine who had first spoken up, stood tall and saluted. "Sir, with your permission, we'd like to run a detail." The old man tilted his head. "A detail? For me?" The Marine smiled. "Yes, sir. A work detail. This is your house, your ground. You served this nation, we figured it's time the nation served you back." And just like that, his front yard was alive with energy. Marines mowing his lawn, fixing his broken fence, patching his roof. Neighbors who had once walked by without noticing him now stepped forward with food, water, and hands ready to help. What began as an act of respect became a movement of unity. Inside, the veteran sat quietly, watching from the window. His throat tightened, not from sadness this time, but from something he hadn't felt in years. Belonging. That afternoon, the Marines gathered around him in the yard. The young Marine presented him with something wrapped in a cloth. Slowly, the veteran unfolded it to reveal a plaque. It read, "To Sergeant Thomas Hale, USMC, Ret. Your service was not forgotten. Your brothers still stand with you. Semper Fidelis." His knees nearly gave way. The plaque wasn't just wood and metal, it was proof. Proof that what he gave, what he sacrificed, still mattered. As weeks passed, the story of Sergeant Hale spread even further. Schools invited him to speak. Veterans began visiting his home, seeking advice, or simply sharing coffee on his porch. The local VFW, once quiet and dwindling, was revived, filled with new faces who had been inspired by his story. The gun shop. It remained closed, its windows dark and boarded up. But in a strange way, it had done something no one expected. It had given rise to a new light, a new awareness, a new respect. On the anniversary of the day he was thrown out of that shop, Marines and veterans from across the state marched to his home in a silent parade. Hundreds of them. Flags waving, boots pounding, salutes sharp. When they reached his front door, they didn't chant, they didn't shout. They simply stood, row after row. Their presence saying everything words could not. Tears streaked down the old veteran's face as he raised his hand in one final salute. His body was frail, his years long behind him. But his spirit soared higher than ever. "Semper Fi," he whispered. And in unison, hundreds of Marines answered back. Semper Fi. For the first time in decades, Sergeant Thomas Hale no longer felt like a forgotten soldier. He was once again part of a corps that never left him. A brotherhood that stretched beyond time.